The alarm blares. Wounded soldiers are rushed in. Blood everywhere. Panic is in the air. Demara, who's never set foot in a medical school, grabs a textbook and locks himself in a cabin. And he crams the basics of battlefield surgery on the HMCS Cayuga. If you're ready to uncover more secrets behind the world's most fascinating kind, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. That way, you'll never miss the next twist in the world of comics, and you'll always be one step ahead of the game. Minutes later, he's in the operating room, scalpel in hand and a man's life on the table. If I hesitate, they'll know. If I act, they'll believe. Each incision wasn't just a test of nerve. It was a gamble with real lives on the line. And somehow, by sheer audacity and a photographic memory, he pulls it off. He saves lives. The crew hails him as a hero. No one suspects a thing. It's the early 1950s. The Korean War is raging, and the Royal Canadian Navy is desperate for doctors. Enter Demara, armed with nothing but a stolen name and the nerve to walk straight into the recruiting office. He's got forged documents, a calm voice, and a story that's just believable enough. The Navy, pressed for time and hungry for talent, barely checks his background. Demara is not just in uniform. He's the ship's trauma surgeon, responsible for the lives of men at war. Picture a man who could be anyone. Doctor, monk, prison warden, even a naval surgeon. That man is Ferdinand Demara, the greatest impostor the world has ever seen. He didn't just fake a resume. He lived entire lives, slipping into new identities like most of us change shirts. Born in Lawrence, Massachusetts, in 1921, Ferdinand Demara grew up in the shadow of the Great Depression. His family, once comfortable, was plunged into poverty when his father's business failed. And Demara learned early the sting of lost status. Shy and overweight, he struggled to fit in at school, but he possessed a photographic memory and a relentless mind. Demara craved respect and belonging, but traditional paths seemed closed to him. Instead, he discovered he could reinvent himself at will, slipping into new identities with ease, each one earning him the admiration and authority he so desperately sought. For Demara, deception became a ticket to the life that he felt he deserved, and the world became his stage. But this wasn't Demara's first act. He'd been reinventing himself since he was 16, first as a runaway monk, then as a psychologist, teacher, prison warden, and always one step ahead of suspicion. Over the years, Demara slipped in and out of roles across the country, leaving a trail of bewildered institutions and colleagues in his wake. He didn't just dabble, he thrived. As a teacher in Maine, he inspired students and faculty alike, despite lacking any real credentials. In Texas, he became the deputy warden of a prison, where he introduced reforms so effective, the state governor took notice, never realizing that their expert had no real experience in corrections. In Massachusetts, he ran a hospital psychology department, diagnosing patients and counseling staff, all while learning on the job. Demara's talent wasn't just in faking paperwork, but in adapting instantly to new environments. He studied obsessively, memorizing just enough to sound like an expert and win people's trust. His rule was simple. The burden of proof is on the accuser. If you act like you belong, most people never question you. If anyone got suspicious, he doubled down. Charm, confidence, and a touch of righteous indignation. But the higher he climbed, the thinner the ice. The real doctor that he was impersonating eventually heard rumors, and he came to investigate. The Navy started to ask questions. Demara's web of lies was beginning to unravel. And yet, even after being exposed, he rarely faced serious consequences. His charm and audacity often left his victims more impressed than angry. The truth finally comes out. The real Dr. Sir confronts the imposter, and the Navy is forced to act. Demara is exposed, but as always, he vanishes before authorities can fully unravel his web. leaving behind stunned, sometimes even admiring victims. The men whose lives are saved are torn, furious at the deception, but grateful for a steady hand in the chaos of war. The newspaper sees the story, dubbing him the great impostor. He becomes a legend overnight. In later years, Demara would reflect, every time I take a new identity, some part of the real me dies, whatever the real me is. Behind every mask, he glimpsed a version of himself, unburdened by the scars of the past, yet always caught in a cycle of yearning and reinvention. Demara faces prison, but his crimes are nonviolent, and his charisma is undeniable. Time and again, he manages to talk himself into lighter sentences, even earning a degree in philosophy behind bars. Yet the spotlight makes his old tricks harder to pull off, and the world changes around him. But here's the lesson. Demara's story isn't just about deception. It's about the power of confidence, the flaws in our institutions, and how desperately people want to believe in authority. He proved that with enough nerve and a little bit of knowledge, you can become anyone, at least for a while. That's the legend of Ferdinand Demara, the man who lived a dozen lives, saved men on the battlefield, and left the world wondering how much of what we see is ever really real. When the applause fades and Demara's true identity is revealed, the world is left stunned at the sheer audacity. For Demara, deception became a ticket to the life that he felt he deserved, and the world became his stage. But how did he keep the act going? And why did so many people believe him? Let's step into the mind of one of the world's greatest imposters. Demara's success began with a clear understanding of human nature, a theme explored by psychologists and social scientists. Maria Konnikova notes, the con works because people want to believe in stories that fit their hopes, needs, and expectations. Demara's genius was to embody whatever others most wanted to see, making it easier for them to accept his presence without question. Demara never announced himself as a fraud. He simply became the role. Doctor, monk, prison warden, teacher, acting as if he belonged. This indirect approach is powerful because people resist overt persuasion, but are highly susceptible to subtle cues of confidence and authority. Demara's seamless adoption of authority gave others no immediate reason to doubt. Demara's charisma and self-assurance triggered the halo effect, a concept explored in social psychology, making people less likely to question his credentials or abilities. His motivations were rarely about money. Instead, he craved recognition, adventure, and the thrill of pulling off the impossible. Demara's sudden appearance, always competent, always composed, created a subtle but powerful incongruity. The best cons exploit moments that don't quite fit our expectations, grabbing our attention and making us eager to solve the mystery. Demara's marks were drawn in, eager to accept his legitimacy and resolve the oddness in their midst. Demara's impersonations satisfied several deep psychological needs. The first, the need to be needed. He often arrived where his skills were desperately required, making others grateful and dependent. Then there's the need for hope. In crisis, Demara represented hope and a solution. People are powerfully drawn to those who offer hope, even if it's illusory. Then there's the need to be right. Once someone accepted Demara's authority, their ego became invested in that belief, making it much harder to admit error. Demara exploited institutional and human psychology, targeting places with urgent needs and weak verification. He relied on the principle, the burden of proof is on the accuser, making people hesitant to challenge someone who seemed so capable. Demara's cons followed the classic pattern, the approach. Identify institutions with urgent needs and weak credential checks. The build-up. Present forged credentials and act with total confidence, quickly gaining trust. The convincer. Perform convincingly in the role, sometimes even excelling. Like when Demara performed surgeries as a doctor on an HMCS Cayuga, saving lives under fire. The hoorah. The institution or group publicly affirms his legitimacy, making it even harder for anyone to question him. The blow-off. When suspicion finally arises, Demara vanishes, leaving behind stunned but often admiring victims. Even after being exposed, some of Demara's former colleagues defended him, recalling his calm in crisis and the lives he saved. Proof that people often cling to their own conclusions, even in the face of uncomfortable truths. True con artists don't force us to do anything. We become complicit in our own undoing, supplying the story ourselves, and believing because we want to. Despite the audacity of his schemes, Demara often left behind stories of lives improved or even saved. As a fake doctor, he performed successful surgeries. As a prison warden, he introduced reforms that benefited inmates. Many who encountered him were left more impressed than angry, and some even grateful. But beneath the surface, Demara's impersonations also sowed confusion, risked lives, and eroded trust in the very systems meant to protect society. Every role he stole was an opportunity denied to someone qualified, and every institution that he fooled was left questioning its own safeguards. Demara's legendary impersonations reveal how deeply the mechanisms of trust, authority, and self-deception run deep in human psychology. By masking his intent, capturing attention with incongruity, and fulfilling hidden psychological needs, he became whatever others needed him to be, a living demonstration of the confidence game. Which raises a difficult question. If Demara could actually do the jobs he impersonated, sometimes even excelling, were his crimes truly victimless? Or did his deceptions leave deeper scars on trust and society? In the end, Demara's story forces us to confront the blurred line between competence and credibility, and to ask whether the ends ever justify the means, when trust itself is the ultimate casualty. But what happens when the imposter doesn't just slip into one life, he takes on hundreds? Next time we dive into the astonishing story of Ferdinand Demara, the chameleon, who claimed more than 500 false identities across Europe and America. From missing children to orphan teens, he fooled families, schools, and even entire communities, sometimes with heartbreaking consequences. How did one man vanish into so many lives? And what drove him to keep running from himself? Subscribe now and hit the bell. You won't want to miss it.